Good evening, everyone. Welcome to starting your sustainable or small farm webinar series. I apologize, I was muted. Access to Capital webinar. So this webinar is just a jumping off point to finding ways to finance your small farm dream. We will be covering a few ways that you can access capital starting today. This is part of a webinar series that we've been offering through Cultivating Success this spring. And we have one more webinar that we'll talk about at the end, and lots of resources for you this evening. So my name is Marcy Miller. I'm the Education Director for Rural Roots, which is a small nonprofit located in Moscow, Idaho. We have been working in partnership with the University of Idaho Extension on the Cultivating Success Beginning Farmer Rancher Development Program. Kate Pater is an extension educator in Bonners Ferry, Idaho, and Jessica McAleese is a farmer from Swift River Farm in Salmon, Idaho. These women are exceptional resources, and I'm so excited to be sharing this evening with them as we move through accessing capital. I understand this can be an overwhelming topic and kind of a scary thing for a lot of beginning farmers to be thinking about to begin with. So we're going to try to lift the veil of some of that mystery surrounding it and try to give you some things to think about and some good places to start as you move into financing your small farm. So some tips this evening for attending our webinar is closing all other programs running on your computer can really help with the speed of the webinar, especially if you're in a rural area with limited internet access. If you have any problems with the sound, sometimes it can get a little choppy. You can call in using the phone number provided in the welcome email. You can also if you would also mute your computer sound while using the phone, that might increase your experience. And if you have any questions this evening, on the right-hand side in the webinar, GoToWebinar control panel, you will see a questions box. For any questions that you have as we move through the evening for the presenters or for technical issues, please type your question into that box, and one of us will make sure to get back to you or let the entire audience know what your question is and get that answered. Handouts are also available on that right-hand side panel. So those are for you to download and to keep with you after this evening's webinar. At the very end of the webinar, there will be a quick survey. If you would fill that out for us, it really helps let us know how we do with these webinars and what sorts of information and things that we can do better in the future. So what is this kind of big topic of accessing capital? And some of the things we're going to be talking about this evening is why it's important to track your money from the very, very beginning. Tracking your income and expenses is incredibly important, and we'll talk a little bit more about why that is. Even if it's just a little bit to begin with and you don't think it's very significant, it can actually make a big difference in the long run. We'll talk about some traditional and some non-traditional sources of funding that we've all had experience with in our years of farming, and then what sorts of funds are available traditionally through banks and the USDA, and then also looking more at crowdfunding and peer-to-peer lending. So we are going to have a quick poll so we know who is in the audience tonight. So when you choose your selection, please let us know who you are, and I'll just give it just a minute to run, and we'll see who is in the audience tonight. So about 80% of you have voted. I'll give it just another couple of seconds here. All right, so we've 100% voted. So we'll share the results. So 40% are planning to farm. You're in the beginning phases of getting all of your ducks in a row. Beginning farmers, 1 to 10 years of experience, about 40% of you, and then 20% of you are experienced farmers with 10 plus years of experience. And I hope you chime in with any additional information that that we might have missed as we go through the evening using the questions box. That is for you as well. Just a second here to get back to our slideshow. I apologize. There we go. So our second poll this evening is where are you located? So we've got North Idaho, Southwest Idaho, Southeast Idaho, and Central Idaho. We'll go ahead and launch that poll now and give you just a second to answer that. Got about 80% of you voted. There we go. So this evening we have about 40% from Northern Idaho, 20% from Southwest Idaho, 20% from Central Idaho, and 20% from Southeast Idaho. This is a great distribution. Thank you all so much for being here this evening. So as we move into accessing capital for new farmers, I'm pleased to be here to help you figure out where to start. So figuring out where to start can be really tricky and completely overwhelming when you're also learning to farm. There seem to be so many opinions out there as to how you should go about funding your new enterprise, whether it be through traditional means of loans from a bank, specific farming programs, especially for beginning farmers, or through social means of raising capital. But where do you begin? What do you need to know to ask the right questions when finance can feel like a completely foreign language? As part of the Cultivating Success courses offered throughout the state, the place we often recommend starting is with a whole farm plan. A whole farm plan can take the 40,000-foot view of your idea and help you manage it into pieces that you can tackle one by one. One of those pieces is choosing the right enterprise. If you are interested in raising sheep for lamb, say, taking the time to learn how to raise sheep, what requirements there are for shelter, feed, the health of the animals, transportation to a processing facility, how are you selling the lamb? There's so many questions, on and on. By taking note of and creating a document that captured all of this big information, you can begin to see what types of investment you might need for your operation. And depending on your farm, whether leased or owned, you can decide what types of things do you need to buy to begin farming. What are things that are on your wish list for future investment? This is an important step in the planning process. Do you need all of the things right now, or can you make do with a little ingenuity and sell your first animals while hauling water multiple times a day to your flock in the middle of winter before purchasing that brand new tank heater? But often there are items that you do need to purchase right away, like your first animals for breeding, hay and feed and processing fees. This is where accessing capital may be put on the to-do list as a new farmer. So I'd like to welcome Kate Painter to take over at this point. So Kate, I am handing, give me just a second here.
Okay, while we wait,
there you are, Kate.
While we wait for the screen to change, I'm kind of still waiting. I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Kate Painter. I'm the Extension Educator for Boundary County in Bonners Ferry, Idaho, and I am thrilled to be part of this webinar tonight. I'm an ag economist by training. I also had a small farm for many years raising sheep, mainly for hand spinning, and I had a value-added business, Paradise Fibers, which still exists in Spokane. I sold it. Anyway, I just always, my dream was to come back in extension and help others, because I personally find that it is really so challenging. It was definitely the most challenging thing I ever did. All right, I'm trying to figure out if I can take control of the screen here. All right, I wanted to start talking just some definitions. And the definition of capital is both your physical and financial assets that have market value. So your cash and bank balances obviously are your capital, but it also includes your money that's invested in your business. So livestock, machinery, buildings, land, those are all considered capital. Okay. And credit is the ability to borrow money with the promise to repay in the future and pay interest for its use. If you've got credit, you've got good credit, that's wonderful. It allows you to acquire productive assets so you can more effectively grow your business. If you don't have capital, you may not be able to make the investments. If you don't have credit, you may not be able to make the investments you need to move along in your farm plan at the speed you'd like to. But I just want to credit everyone for attending the webinar and doing this research. It's so important to be thinking ahead about your needs and where you're going and what you want mine to do, and to just learn about all of the opportunities that are available, all the resources that are available to help you. A lot of farmers, they're so busy with their production and what they're going to do. But this is a really good thing to do, to be learning about the steps you need to make now to help you as your business grows. Okay, so different things you might need capital for. Obviously, buying the farm, maybe land, so long-term type of loans. Farm assets such as machinery and fencing would be more like intermediate assets that you need. And then you would have maybe more short-term needs like financing the farm, operating loans, maybe annual credit lines for keeping your cash flow going well. And I just wanted to define your owner equity. This is the farmer's own capital, and that is basically your net worth, and you calculate that by the current value of all your assets less what you owe on them. And you would have current assets that are very liquid, like your cash in the bank. You would have other less liquid, so less easy to convert into cash assets like machinery and long-term assets like land. But these are the kind of calculations you would need to make if you're going to fill out documents for getting a loan. So it's good to think about these things and start documenting what you have. There are other sources of equity, other ways to maybe help you along when you're starting out, and one may be having some outside equity. You may have a landlord that would be willing to invest in your operation and do some kind of a cost or crop share arrangement where maybe they're providing some of the livestock, fertilizer, seed, etc., in exchange for a share of the earnings. In the old days, people used to do a cost share where the landlord would pay for a third of the seed, a third of the fertilizer, and then get a third of the crop in exchange in the place of rent. But there are so many other arrangements that could be made as you're starting up. And it may be cheaper to rent or lease capital assets in the beginning, and that will help you learn without so much liability and also give you some really good experience. For those who with very little capital, they may need to do contract farming where others supply the capital and they supply the labor. An old example would be broiler production in the South, where basically the people had the land and the labor, and all of the inputs they needed were supplied for them. But other more modern things would be some custom farming where you're mainly supplying the labor, some kind of contract farming. So there's lots of different options. Okay, so talking about capital sources, the 4 different documents, the handouts, I'm going to talk about those a little bit as we go through these. From the very beginning, to go into a traditional bank and get a loan, it may be very hard to attain because beginning farmers often lack sufficient equity or collateral. You may have to have a co-signer to help you have sufficient equity to reduce the risk of the bank to loan to you. There is an excellent handout, the first one in the documents section of the webinar, and it's how to finance a small farm. It's written by Karen Klonsky from UC Davis, and it talks about some of the things you would want to have, and this would be applicable for traditional bank loans as well as the USDA subsidized programs. And it's good to think about in advance before you get started. One would be a resume describing your background. You may be asked to kind of show why they should lend you money. Others may be copies of your income tax, financial statements for each of the last few years. Traditionally, you have to show a balance sheet, an income statement, and some sort of cash flow budget that shows what you did maybe last year, and then one that's prospective, so what you would be needing going forward, so that you came in very organized and said, this is what I need to borrow. Anyway, some really good ideas to do some research and look through that, just to make you look very organized and businesslike, so that you're thinking ahead of how you might take some of your experience and put them in a resume. There's a lot of USDA subsidized programs, and the rest of the handouts give you more detail on those. The Farm Service Agency, FSA loans are traditionally the area that you would go for farm loans, but there are other USDA programs as well. The Natural Resources Conservation Service, or NRCS, has a lot of cost share programs. You've probably heard of the high tunnel programs that they've been doing all over the country. Some other very promising areas to look into are value-added grants. We've had several folks in my area develop goat dairies and some other programs where they've gotten excellent funding, not only for planning grants, but for working capital. And there is a handout there that is, if you start on page 4 of the larger handout there, it talks about the Farm Service Agency, NRCS, and the value-added grants. And let me see. Okay, so that is the USDA Small Farm Funding Resources document, a Word document. And there's another Word document that is about the SARE program, the Sustainable Ag Research and Education Program. And that is more geared toward small farmers. And it has some excellent materials, books that are downloadable from the Learning Center. There is Building a Sustainable Business, a very large handbook, a guide to developing a business plan for farms and rural businesses. There's also a number of grant programs, many of them fairly small, $20,000 to $25,000, but geared towards farmers and ranchers. So I encourage you to look through those. All right. Oops. Okay, so grants are typically very specific in terms of what you'll be able to use the money for. They're not free money. Typically, there's some sort of pretty strict requirements, but the folks that administer those are very helpful, I've found. For example, the NRCS high tunnel grants, we've had a number of those go up here, and there's a lot of requirements and some paperwork, but the folks at the Farm Service Agency are very helpful. It's just great to go and meet them and to let them know who you are and what kind of assistance you're looking for, and they can guide you through all of the different programs and paperwork and maybe guide you towards something that's specifically helpful for your situation. The NRCS high tunnel grants, those are a little daunting for some that don't have capital, because you have to put up and construct your tunnel and show that it's producing before you get reimbursed. So even though they're grants, you still have to find some funding sources for these, and they do have some funding sources they can help you with that. One of the wonderful things is that a portion of the funding, the USDA assistance, is set aside for beginning farmers and ranchers, and that includes farm ownership loans and operating loans, also guaranteed loans. There's a whole program where the USDA is guaranteeing loans through a commercial lender. And I want to just say that beginning is defined as 10 years or less farming. So you don't have to be necessarily a young person, and 10 years is a pretty long time. So there are special programs developed for that. There's also special programs for veterans, for women, and I would encourage you to just look through those USDA small farm funding resources. And there's another handout, USDA New Farmer Loans, that goes through all these different types, whether they're for land or conservation programs or whatever. It's just amazing how much there is out there. So just some quick definitions here. Short-term or operating loans are typically for one season, and they're usually for purchasing seed or fertilizer, maybe feed or livestock. And these are very common because you may need to borrow money to get through the season, and then you can repay those at the end of the season from your crops. Intermediate loans are typically more than a year but less than 10 years, and those are designed for purchasing a little bit longer term capital assets like machinery, livestock, and buildings, and you may have annual or semi-annual loan payments. So these would be, kind of like purchasing a car or a tractor, but with USDA support. USDA also has a lot of long-term loans, even up to 40 years, for buying land, also buildings, and you may have annual or semi-annual loan payments. So just to speak for a moment on hurdles to traditional funding for new farmers, it is difficult to find the credit often when you're starting out. You often lack the collateral, the net worth, and the experience that lenders are looking for. But both the Farm Service Agency and Farm Credit Services offer special services for farmers with 10 years or less of experience. And as you go through these documents, there is a lot of resources. They can be kind of daunting. I do encourage you to go meet your local people. And even if you don't have local representatives from an agency you'd like to visit with, they do, you can make an appointment, and they do typically come through on a regular basis. Okay, just to highlight what Marcy talked about at the very beginning, record keeping is so important. I think one of the points I wanted to get across in this webinar is how to look very business-like. And if you have accurate records and you look very organized on paper, it will really help. It will really help you get a loan. Lenders have to be looking for things to advert them to the fact that you may be a risky candidate. They will assume the worst case scenario. You have to show them that you are creditworthy. And if you appear risky, you tend to get higher interest rates. As a small farm, and if you don't have much in the way of collateral, you're probably going to be facing higher interest rates, which is why we have USDA support, which often is in the form of very low interest rates for beginning farmers and ranchers. So again, emphasizing the importance of record keeping. It will help you assess your profit, manage your cash flow, analyze your investments, compare alternatives, and file taxes. So how do you get a system for doing all these things? You need to really help yourself by creating a system. Sometimes you might use those bank ledgers that you used to use to balance checkbooks and just use that to record things. Have one in your vehicle for um, recording mileage, and that way you can say how much was farm related and how much was personal. You need to have these kind of documentation for your taxes anyway, and it'll help you just figure out how much it's costing you to do everything. You do need to have some sort of system for organizing data, some file folders for your records. Some things are really hard to sit down and think about, especially if you're waiting till winter to think back about some things. I do encourage you to even try to track how much time it takes you to do some of your farming so you can get an idea of the labor expense. You've got lots of other items that you may not be thinking about in particular, but how might you document costs related to sales or marketing? Maybe you've taken some trips or you've purchased some things. Look through your schedule app and know the categories so that you can make a system of arranging your receipts that will really help you. It will help you with your taxes, and they'll help you figure out how you're doing as you go along. So there are, as I said, some really excellent resources online. This one here is specifically about access to land and capital, and there's the address right there, newfarmers.usda.gov. I encourage you to look at that. Another good agency is the U.S. Small Business Administration. One of the most important things to have is a good business plan. Most lenders do expect a business plan when you apply for startup funding, and there are many free business plan guides, as well as very specific ones for farmers. And you'll see more of those in the resources and the documents, and we'll talk a little bit more about those later.
Thank you so much, Kate. It is daunting, but to really break it down the way that you have I think is really, really helpful. Of, what are some of the definitions? What are some of the terms that you will hear as you are talking to these lenders, talking to the Farm Service Agency? So there are a couple questions from Anna Clark. Is SARE mostly for research?
That's a very good question. You usually need some sort of researchable question. You can't just apply for a grant to do your small farm. You have to have something you're experimenting with. It is very geared towards small farmers and farmer educator collaborations, but you have to be trying to answer some kind of question. Typically, trying to sort out how cover crops work in your area, trying A, B, C, and D. So it is kind of geared towards on-farm research.
Yeah. Another tip from Anna is she makes a large calendar and keeps track of hours and any other important events. I think that's a great suggestion. We do that. We buy one of those big laminated full year at a glance calendars, and we write in there when our quarterly sales tax is due and different types of big events that we know are coming up. I think that's a great suggestion. And keeping track of your time. I think we absolutely undervalue our time as farmers, and I know that we did for many years until we decided it was time to buckle down and figure out what we were actually doing. So I'm going to talk real quick just about the two different types of funding. So one of the things that Kate discussed was this traditional type of funding, Farm Service Agency, going to traditional lenders. And I'm going to talk really quick, and then I'm going to let Jessica chime in about her experience with non-traditional funding, traditional and non-traditional funding. So when my husband and I first started planning our farm, we scoured the internet for information about how we could finance our dream. Could we, straight out of college, working for another farm and a nonprofit, really qualify for a loan to buy a piece of land? And for us, the answer was no at that time. But that didn't mean that we couldn't bootstrap our first few years, asking our family and friends. We asked them to gift us seeds or gift certificates or farm equipment, small like a seeder, a push seeder for every holiday for the first few years. So for all of our birthdays and other holidays, that's what we asked for. We pirated bricks from all over town. We used irrigation from other farms. We traded compost, and then until we could secure our first sales. And after our first market, when we grossed $1,000, we celebrated. We counted the money again, but then we celebrated some more. We couldn't believe it. But the more important thing that we did in the first few years was to track our money in and out and report it to the government on a Schedule F. Because what that did is it made us legitimate farmers. It let lenders know we were serious. If we had gone to a bank, it let them know that this is what we were doing. We still had other jobs at the time in which we started recording this income and expenses for the farm and filing our Schedule F for the first year. But that was really important to us. We going through the Cultivating Success courses ourselves knew that this was an important piece. So we leased our farm for the first 6 years before buying it, and we also leased 4 other sites. And having this written plan of what our vision was, what our future looked like, and tracking those expenses, filing a Schedule F, it proved that we were a legitimate business with foresight into how we were eventually going to net some income. Getting in to meet with any of these types of lenders, they're going to ask you about every detail of your farm and finances. You need to know this stuff inside and out. You need to sell yourself to a bank or a credit union and have it all on paper to back it up. So another great option available to us today is social networking. And from that, creating networks of folks who want to invest in a local startup. But very similar to traditional types of funding, even non-traditional types of funding require extensive knowledge of your financial situation and needs. So I'm going to be handing it off to Jessica McAleese, who will be talking more both about their experience with FSA loans as well as their experience with non-traditional funding.
Well, great. Thank you, Marcy. And I'll just try to advance these slides here quickly, more or less, to our next. Oh dear. Just a short little introduction to our farm. This is our 5th year growing in Salmon, Idaho. And before that, we were 5 years in Pocatello. And so we are 10 years farming now. So just moving past the new and beginning stage into the, I don't know, not new and beginning farmer stage. It doesn't make us experts by any means, but it does make us experienced. And like Marcy and Greg, Jeremy and I, my farm partner and partner in crime, we started by our bootstraps and really didn't start acquiring land or debt or anything like that until the fall of 2016. So just a couple years ago, we finally were able to stop leasing farmland and purchase our very own land here in Salmon. And so I wanted to talk just a little bit about those traditional lending sources because I think they are very important and they can make farming and access to this thing that we love to do very, very possible. Without the Farm Service Agency, the FSA New and Beginning Farm Loan Program, we would not have been able to purchase our farmland, which you see in the black and white picture on your screen. And that was a very unique arrangement because the Farm Service Agency, they do have beginning farm loans for people like us, but the one that we qualified for, we had to find another lender for the other half of the loan. And so we were in a unique opportunity to have our local land trust carry the other half of that loan at a very reasonable interest rate. If we had gone to a bank, a traditional bank lender, that interest rate would have been over 9%. And our land trust was able to carry that loan at way, way less than that. And the FSA loan, the FSA half of that loan for our land was at 1.5%. So that those numbers might not sound like much to you right now, but it's a huge difference in terms of acquiring that sort of loan burden in terms of our small farm business. So as a result of that traditional loan, we were able to purchase 10 acres here in Salmon and finally be able to farm our very own farmland. This is our second season on that land. And the cool part about that loan was that we were able to wrap into it some infrastructure development, like the fencing picture that you see in the middle there, and also the celebratory day that we finally got water from our well. The drilling of the well, the irrigation, that was all rolled into that direct ownership farm loan. So it wasn't just acquiring the land. We were able to write some pretty significant upfront costs into that loan. And we have a once-a-year loan payment. It's totally reasonable for us as a business, and it takes a lot of stress out of trying to make a living doing what we so love to do. However, there is a lot of paperwork involved, so don't go into this with your blinders on. Expect it to be very federal. It is a lot of federal language, with a lot of federal paperwork, a lot of signatures, and a lot of record keeping. So part of going this route is doing your homework and being okay with it. Jeremy and I, we dumpster dived and held ourselves up by our bootstraps for a long time, and without any debt or anything. And then finally, wanting to purchase land, we decided to jump through all these hoops, and it really did make a huge difference in our farm business. So I would recommend going down that option if it makes sense for you as a farm. And my last bullet says, don't be afraid of borrowing money. I was terrified of borrowing money. I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to be indebted to anybody or any entity. But as I look at it over the long term, it's actually an investment in my farm future. And I have come to understand how that can work for a business, especially a small farm business. But I would caution you to be smart about it, read all of the details, and be realistic. Don't get in over your head. If you want to, you can always start small and kind of swallow that pill slowly. And then if you need more capital in the future, then you can always go back and ask for more. Another cool program that we were able to go through down on the right-hand side with the big solar panels was one of the programs that Kate mentioned, was the rural development loans. And this particular one was called Rural Energy for America. It's REAP, known as REAP. And it's a loan program or a grant program. And we were able to qualify for a 25% grant to help install our solar system for the farm. So we are totally off-grid. We are not tied to the power grid. We're 100% solar, and that REAP grant helped us do that. So it powers our pump that irrigates our farm, and we have a battery set up, and it just is pretty rad, actually. And we wouldn't have been able to do that without that REAP program. So don't be afraid of it, but be realistic and definitely expect some major paperwork. Let's see, I'll try to advance the slide one more time. Oh, there we go. Oh, back, there we are. So part of that loan process, I guess I just have 4 main steps that you should consider. And I know we've talked about it before, but keeping great records from day one. If you're not keeping great records yet, do it tomorrow. Just start writing things down, start tracking your money, start filing that Schedule F that Marcy talked about, because it all makes it legitimate on paper. And if you can legitimize your business on paper, then you become a real powerful force when you walk into somebody's office. Second, make a wish list for your farm. Like, what do you really want to purchase for the coming years? What do you need out of this loan? And write everything down, like pie in the sky sort of thing. And then with that list, make a priority list because you most likely will not be able to afford everything on your wish list. So make that priority list. And that helped Jeremy and I a lot because we were able to say, well, our main priority is acquiring land. But if we buy land and we don't have a well, or we don't have power, or we don't have a fence, we really won't be able to farm it. And if we're not able to farm it, then we can't make a loan payment. So we're able to prioritize those things and design a loan or a piece of funding that works very specifically for our farm business. And that's going to be very different than your farm business. The third step then, once you have these 2 things, is to contact your local or regional agent. And sometimes it's intimidating making that phone call and saying, hey, my name's Jessica, I don't know what I'm doing and never applied for a loan before. Can you walk me through the steps? But that is what these people are hired to do. And our local, actually he's not local, he was regional. We had to go clear to Rexburg, which is about 2 hours away, to sometimes meet with him. But he more often would come up to Salmon, which was nice. He was awesome. He helped us do all the paperwork. He walked us through it. He dotted the T's and or dotted the I's and crossed the T's for us. And it was really, really helpful. So don't be intimidated by it too much. Make that contact and they should be able to help you. And if you don't like that person, like it's just not meshing, contact somebody else. Call the state office and get in touch with a regional agent that will work for you. And fourth, really do your homework before applying for that loan. Make sure it's the right loan that you would like to apply for. We recently just acquired some cost share funding for a high tunnel. It's called the Rolling Thunder, and it's a rolling high tunnel. But we really had to do our homework before applying for that because we wanted a rolling one, not a stationary high tunnel. And our local agent had never, ever done that before. And so we had to have all of our information ready to go to make our case to the NRCS. And fortunately for us, they were very amenable to the information we provided. But I don't think that they would have been so eager to go that route if we hadn't done our due diligence and found other farms in the country that had applied for these rolling high tunnels before. And lastly, of course, again, be smart and be realistic. So those are the traditional routes that we went through. We did the rural development, the REAP program. We did the beginning small farmer and ranch loan program. We did NRCS. And I work with the farmers market, so I've done the farmers market promotion program. We're looking into the organic cost share program. There's all sorts of traditional USDA loans out there. However, we also were able to do a non-traditional funding source through crowdfunding, and we did a Kickstarter campaign to help raise the money to build our barn on our farm. You'll see that in the right-hand corner. And that was a really, actually, it was kind of a humbling experience for us because, for one, we had been farming for 5 or 6 years and had built a big community of people who wanted to see us succeed. But we had really never asked those people for help before. if you're like most farmers, we're very independent people. We like to do things on our own time frame. We like to do things on our own and our own way. That's kind of why we farm. And it's kind of hard sometimes to actually ask for help. However, this was a really great way for us to access a good amount of cash. We raised over $25,000 in 30 days to build our barn. And we would not have been able to do that in addition to purchasing the land and building all the infrastructure we needed to get going. It was also a really great project that our community could come together around. Nobody wants to, throw down money for a septic system or for boring old irrigation. However, a good old-fashioned barn raiser, something exciting like that, people really rallied around that idea. And if you're thinking about crowdfunding, there's a lot of different options. There's Barn Raiser, there's GoFundMe, there's Kickstarter. We did our homework and we chose Kickstarter because it made sense for our project and our region. People here don't seem to respond to GoFundMe campaigns as well as some other campaigns. So that's why we chose Kickstarter. If you are going to take a crash course, please don't just decide to do it and then launch your idea the next day. Please take some time and really design your project and make sure it makes sense. You have to be prepared to put yourself out there in a very vulnerable and very loud sort of way. We're constantly on Facebook. We're constantly emailing. It was very time intensive. But it was really humbling as people started donating to the campaign, people that we didn't even know from all over the world. And so that was a really cool part, because not only did our community of people who support us donate, but we got some new supporters out of the deal too. So that's why I say do it well and do it with heart. Put your heart and soul into it. Be smart and be realistic, again, please. And then have a community for your idea, not just the people that live around you or live in your town, but a community of people who know who you are, who support what you do. Have that infrastructure in place before you launch your project on a crowdfunding site. You don't just want to think that, oh, this is so good, it's going to go viral. It's not going to happen. So people need to know that they're committed before you even launch your project. And then what really helped me was to have a plan in place before we launched the project. A plan, a marketing plan, like a calendar of when I was going to post my Facebook posts and when I was going to send out emails and what they was going to say and what my thank yous were going to look like and all of this business. So having all of that in place before we launched the project really helped make it a smoother sort of endeavor for us. And again, there's no free money. Kickstarter, we were granted $25,000, a little over $25,000 for that barn, but then they take a 5% commission off of that, and then all of that income is reported as income to the IRS. And so you have got to take good records of spending that money. And it really, you can't do something like this and expect not to report it. And so just take that into consideration. Having a big influx of income like that, you really have to have a plan in place to do it legitimately. But it was really fun and such a humbling experience. Let's see, I think that's about it for me, but I would love to answer any questions or if anybody has insight to share.
Yeah, thank you, Jessica. So there are a couple questions, and these may or may not pertain to you specifically, but let me pull them up here. So generally speaking, what sort of collateral is required for loans? I know many large farms, especially dairies, have to put everything they own, including their homes, up as collateral. What was your experience with that, Jessica?
Well, gosh, we didn't have any collateral. We had rented an apartment and a house. We rented everything. We had a crappy old Subaru that was like had 250,000 miles. So going through that farm service agency loan, you really didn't have to have collateral necessarily to qualify. You did have to show I think it was 3 years of farm records, and you had to show projections of what you thought might happen in the coming 3 to 5 years. And then as things all kind of ironed out, you had to make the down payment. They do have some programs that don't require a down payment, but we chose to do the down payment one. But it was only, a couple, I think it was like $4,000 for our loan of a down payment. So it wasn't too daunting for us to tackle that. But no collateral.
Good to know. How much do lenders care about whether your farm is organized as a separate registered business entity?
Well, I don't know about banks, like private lenders, but the farm service agency, in my experience, I had the farm under a sole proprietorship under my name. And so I file a Schedule F for the farm business, but then I also do farm consulting, and sometimes in the winter I work at the bakery here in Salmon. So I have all of this sort of organized, but it's all under, my social security number. So I don't think it's super imperative that, you have your farm set up as an LLC or a S Corp or anything like that. You just have to have it organized on those tax documents. So that Schedule F that you talked about, Marcy, that's the most important.
Right. I think from from our farm law series that we did early this this winter, if you don't file as a business entity like an LLC, it'll default to a sole proprietorship when you file that Schedule F. See if that helps. Sorry, Jessica, I muted you because there was a crazy noise. And so there's another question. When you say agent, are you referring to extension office? I think what Jessica was referring to was the farm service agency as an agent. That would be their job title. Extension offices can absolutely help you with gathering your documents, gathering the materials that you need, writing your business plan. That's what Kate does in Boundary County. So there is a difference between the two. If they're a federal employee in the NRCS, the Natural Resource Conservation Service, or the Farm Service Agency, those typically are referred to as agents. So that's a good question, Amanda. So I'm going to talk a little bit about peer-to-peer lending. So this was our experience in our first couple of years. We too were very debt adverse, and so we really tried to bootstrap as much as we could. But we found after our first growing season that we needed additional growing space. We had one hoop house that we grew in, and recognized very quickly that we needed more heated covered space. That covered space for us growing veggies in Moscow was our most valuable and productive space that we had to our name. So we chose to go the peer-to-peer lending route, which was through Kiva Loans, Kiva Zip kiva.org, I believe. They've changed it a couple of times. There's been a few iterations of it. But what Kiva is a peer-to-peer lending organization. So similar to Kickstarter or GoFundMe, is you put an idea out onto the website, then people will loan money to you, and that's in $25 increments. So family and friends could come and donate or lend that money to us, and then we had the same as Kickstarter. We had 30 days to raise the entire amount of money that we had requested. So a little bit different is Kiva requires borrowers to complete a business plan. They also provide a template for you if you need a template for your business plan. And then your application and for your loan is sent to a local group. In the case of North Idaho, there's a trustee group, U of I and Small Business Development Center folks and economic development folks. So this group looks over your application, they look over your business plan, you submit to them a full budget of what you will use the funds for. At the time that we applied, this was 2012, the maximum amount allowable for loans was $5,000. And even to us, $5,000 was like, wow, that's a lot of money. So we really narrowed it down to what we absolutely needed. And the idea was we had a specific project. So similar to the Kickstarter is having a really specific project that people have this tangible idea of. So ours was to fund the hoop house infrastructure. And so this group looks everything over. Then they basically vouch for your application. This is called social underwriting. That means that they are going to be there as this group, as this trustee group, to help make sure you fulfill your end of the bargain, that you fulfill your obligation in the purchasing of the items, and that then when you go into repayment, that you make good on your repayments. So I think it's really interesting that Kiva they take no money out of the loan. So every dollar that you raise as part of your campaign goes to you. They have a 97% repayment rate, and they have loans all over the world. So Kiva originated in developing countries for all types of businesses, including agriculture and food businesses. And then I think it was 2011 is when they started doing the same program in the United States. And so you can see here there's 86 countries that they have successfully funded and loaned money to, with over $1.1 billion in loans. When we applied for the program, there was a 6-month deferment specifically for agricultural loans. So if you were considered a farmer in their program, you had 6 months to start repaying that money back, which for us was huge. We submitted our application in November, were funded in 12 days, and then we had 6 months, so the start of the next farmers market season, to start paying back our loan. And it was a 3.5-year repayment program. So the trustee group that we met with, we're going to do this huge press blitz in Moscow and really get the local community to rally behind and get us funded really fast. But we were funded so quickly that they weren't even able to get that press release sent out. It took 12 days for us to raise the funds that we needed. There is another option now. Instead of going through a trustee group, which for everybody in Idaho, you go through this trustee group that I'll talk about in a second. But there's another option, which basically you raise a certain percentage of funds from your family and friends before your listing goes live on Kiva. And this was just another option for folks who may not be in an area with small business development support or extension educators who were invested in their type of small business, because it is open to all types of small businesses. And so that's another option for folks who are looking to go into Kiva for their loan. There's another option called Lending Club, which is a low interest rate lending organization. And these are private investors who are looking for some percentage of a return on their money. So that's another option. I haven't looked too much into it, but I do know of a few folks that were really passionate about knowing where their money was being invested, and this idea of local investment is starting to take hold in some areas, and that's another option that you can specifically look in your area or apply in your area. So our local trustee group is the Camas Community Lending Network, and they will work with farmers throughout the state of Idaho. They will go over your business plan. They will help you with your budgeting. They have a whole list of experts that you can rely on, and that is at no cost. They can be contacted at CAMAS, CAMAS, lending, LENDING, at gmail.com for more information. So Kiva is a 0% interest loan. You receive the lenders at the end of your repayment. So for us, at the end of the 3.5 years, received a notice from Kiva that their payment had been fulfilled, and they were able to either reloan that money within Kiva and keep it within the Kiva program and just keep relending it, or they had the option to pull their funding out and use it elsewhere. So what can you do next? I'm going to just quickly go here and look for any questions. I thought I saw one pop up. Off topic, but how does one go about to finding farm land to lease? Richard, that is an excellent question. One of our previous webinars was all about Idaho FarmLink, which is our new program for the entire state of Idaho that links landowners and land seekers by submitting an application. And that information is available on the Cultivating Success website through FarmLink. And you can email myself or info@cultivatingsuccess.org for more information about that. So what can you do next? Finding a mentor, finding somebody who has been through the process of finding capital, accessing capital previously, whether that is Jessica or myself or Kate or somebody locally in an extension or FSA office. Another farmer is a great way to create community and to really have some real life experience about what is happening in your region specifically. Keeping track of your money. I know we've said it a million times, but that's one of the really, the key things to take away from this webinar. And then working on developing a whole farm plan that includes a business plan. It includes a budget. It includes where you see your farm going in the next few years up to 10 plus years. Resources in your area include an FSA office, the Farm Service Agency office, the Natural Resource Conservation Service office, county extension, and others. So each county or region within the state, sometimes they break it up by region, has an FSA and NRCS office. So those you can go to their websites and start looking for, or we might be able to help you locate somebody in your region who could help. And I wanted to just quickly mention that 2018 is a Farm Bill year. They just released the newest Farm Bill recommendations last week, and those really affect what funding sources are available through the federal government for beginning farmers and for all farmers. And the National Young Farmers Coalition is a website that I really encourage you to go take a look at. They've got a lot of good information also about finding farmland, but they put out a great article about what it means to look at the Farm Bill and what are some of the programs that may or may not have funding in this next Farm Bill. And so one of the things that you can do is take a look at some of the articles and critique. I would not expect anybody to sit down and read the Farm Bill cover to cover unless it's spring now. We should all be out working, right? So it's a great time of year for them to put out that Farm Bill when all the farmers are getting busy. So finding an article, finding a trustworthy news source to find out what resources they may or may not be funding, and contacting your Congress people to encourage certain programs, especially for beginning farmers. So, Kate, if you're still there.
Okay, hi. I just wanted to just mention for a second on the earlier question about, generally speaking, what sort of collateral is required for loans. And I would really caution against when you're encouraged to, put your home, maybe your family, your relatives' homes up for collateral, because obviously if things go badly, then you're going to be losing maybe your home, maybe even like your parents' home if you put that up for collateral. And there are other ways. I would continue to keep doing research and working with some of the USDA programs to qualify for other less risky loans. If you went to a commercial bank, they might require a lot more collateral, but the USDA has programs where they're going to guarantee loans and help you. For example, the direct farm ownership loan on this slide, up to $300,000. Over 40 years, down payment loans, and there are such things as micro loans for qualified for many operating expenses for up to $50,000, 1 to 7 years. I had someone come in my office, and she's always coming up with just kind of impulsive ideas, and she wanted a microloan, and she wanted to know where to get her lavender plants, and she was ready to go, and she thought of it last Friday, and it was Monday, and she just wanted to go. And I sat down and talked to her and, tried to get her to think about, this isn't free money. She goes, well, I don't have to have a business plan. I don't, because I'm just going to use my own personal, savings as collateral. But I'm like, what if it goes wrong? Are you ready to then pay it back out of your personal savings? Let's sit down and think about this a little bit longer. She's unusually compulsive that way. I'm sure you all know people like that, but those are very easy loans to get if you have a great idea, but it doesn't pay to not think things through. So one of your handouts goes through all of these types of USDA Farm Service Agency loans. There's direct operating loans for many purposes, guaranteed loans, like I said, that you could go with a bank and they partner with them, conservation practices loans, even youth loans for up to $5,000, 1 to 7 years repayment. So definitely get familiar with all of these programs. They're there for a reason. They're tax supported so that we can support our farmers. Let's see, is that the last slide?
Yeah, so
just
a few resources to take away. One of the best business templates for farmers that I've seen and used personally was out of University of Minnesota as the Ag Plan Farm Business Template, and that is free. You can go in and register, and it takes you through a really in-depth business plan, step by step, and you basically kind of just fill in the blanks paragraph by paragraph, and it has explanations along the way of definitions as you go through. That's a great resource. So then coming back to one of the resources that Kate mentioned was the USDA New Farmers website. They have a whole section on making a farm business plan. And then farmanswers.org is a national clearinghouse for the Beginning Farmer Rancher Development Grant program, which is part of what is funding this Cultivating Success project right now. And they are aggregating all kinds of information from all of the different projects throughout the United States, specifically for beginning farmers. So that's a really great place to go and look for information as you're planning and moving forward. So this is our website. As I mentioned, that farm link tab is there in the top, and you can go and find more information and apply for farm link that you are a job seeker or land seeker in that link. And our next webinar is all about record keeping, and it's Are You Making Money? And that's going to be with Montessa Young, and she's in Washington County, University of Idaho Extension, and we haven't yet set a new date for that, but as soon as we have a date for it, it'll be up on our website, and we will blast it out on Facebook as well. But these are all of the previous webinars here that we have that we have done and that are free for you to watch through the Cultivating Success website. All you have to do is go in and enter your email address, and you will get sent a link for these recorded webinars. And at the end of each webinar, of course, we have our contact information that if you have follow-up questions or any other questions about the program, Cultivating Success, or anything, you can reach out to one of us. And I didn't have Jessica's email in there because I thought if there were any questions for her, you could direct them my way, and I would get those to her. It's the beginning of farming season, so I want to be respectful of her time in this spring work. So that is it for this evening. I so appreciate you all coming. There is a quick survey after I close the webinar, and thank you so much for joining us this evening, and we will hopefully see you next time. Thank you.